David Lammy just claimed that Brexit badly damaged Britain's economy and suggested we should consider rejoining the customs union. Within hours, an economist took one look at the actual data, created a simple graph, and absolutely demolished his entire argument. But before we proceed, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more updates on this channel. Thank you. We're talking career-ending levels of embarrassment here, the kind of factual takedown that makes you wonder if anyone in government actually checks things before saying them out loud. Spoiler alert, they don't. I'm your host at UK Political Insight, and today we're diving into what happens when political rhetoric meets economic reality and gets absolutely battered. David Lammy, who is not just some backbench nobody, but the actual Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary, has gone rogue on Brexit, breaking manifesto pledges and making claims about economic damage that fall apart the moment you look at comparative growth data. It's political incompetence meets economic illiteracy. And honestly, it's quite the spectacle. So let's break down this absolute masterclass in how not to make economic arguments. Because what we're witnessing here is a senior government minister making confident claims about Brexit's impact that are contradicted by the most basic international comparisons. It's like confidently declaring that going to the gym made you weaker while standing next to people who didn't go to the gym and are clearly in worse shape than you. The evidence is right there, visible to anyone who bothers to look. But somehow, Lammy missed it entirely. First, let's establish what Lammy actually said, because the quotes are genuinely remarkable. He claimed Brexit had badly damaged our economy, which is quite the statement from someone who's supposed to be representing the government's position. He then suggested Britain should consider closer integration with Brussels and potentially rejoin the customs union. Now, he did caveat this by saying rejoining the customs union is not currently government policy, which is politician speak for "I want to do this, but I know it's controversial, so I'm testing the waters." But then he made a specific claim that's absolutely crucial to his argument. He said it's self-evident that other countries with customs unions have seen growth as a result. His example was Turkey, claiming they're seemingly benefiting and seeing growth in their economy from their customs union with the EU. This is where things get interesting, because Lammy's not just making a general political argument about Brexit being bad. He's making a specific economic claim that rejoining a customs union would boost growth, using Turkey as his evidence. Now, there are about 17 problems with using Turkey as your example for successful customs union membership, but we'll get to that. The immediate issue is that Lammy's entire premise that Brexit badly damaged UK economic growth got absolutely shredded by actual comparative data. Enter Julian Jessup, a fellow at the Institute for Economic Affairs who clearly woke up this morning and chose violence. Economic violence, the kind that involves graphs and GDP comparisons, which somehow feels even more brutal than the regular kind. Jessup took aim at a recent pro-EU paper that's been circulating claiming UK GDP would be approximately 8% higher if it weren't for Brexit. This is a claim you've probably seen bouncing around social media and various commentary pieces. The argument goes that Brexit caused massive economic damage, costing us 8% of GDP growth we would have otherwise enjoyed. It sounds devastating. An 8% GDP hit is enormous. That's the kind of economic damage you'd associate with major crises, not democratic votes to leave a trading bloc. But Jessup created a simple chart comparing the GDPs of the UK, France, and Germany from 2014 onwards, covering the period before and after the Brexit referendum. And this chart absolutely demolishes the Brexit destroyed our economy narrative, because here's what the data actually shows. Since the referendum in 2016, UK growth has been identical to France and substantially better than Germany. Not worse, not catastrophically damaged, actually better than Germany, Europe's largest economy and supposed powerhouse. The UK economy has grown by about 12% since 2016. That's the actual real-world data. And when you compare that to other major economies, Britain has outpaced Japan, Germany, Italy, and France. Let that sink in for a moment. The country that supposedly shot itself in the foot by leaving the EU has grown faster than multiple countries that stayed in the EU. If Brexit was this catastrophic economic mistake, how exactly are we outperforming EU members who made the smart choice to stay in? Jessup then did something brilliantly visual on his chart. He added a unicorn symbol to show where UK GDP would be if you added that claimed 8% Brexit damage back on. And here's the thing. If that 8% figure was real, the UK would have been the fastest growing economy in the G7 apart from the United States. we would have left our EU peers completely in the dust. France and Germany wouldn't even be close. As Jessup noted, this would not be impossible, but it is surely unlikely. That's economists speak for this claim is absolute nonsense. If Brexit really cost us 8% of GDP, it means without Brexit, we would have been outperforming essentially everyone in Europe by a massive margin, which raises the obvious question, why would we assume Britain would have been this incredible outlier of economic success? What specific factors would have made us grow so much faster than France and Germany? The claim doesn't just require Brexit to have damaged our economy, it requires you to believe that without Brexit we would have been an economic superpower relative to our peers, and there's simply no evidence to support that assumption. Jessup described the pro-EU argument as almost entirely wrong, which is possibly the most polite way to say this is complete rubbish while maintaining professional credibility. The graph he created isn't complicated economic modeling or disputed statistics. It's literally just the GDP growth rates of 3 comparable economies over the same time period. It's the kind of basic comparison any first-year economics student could do, and it completely contradicts the narrative that Lammy is pushing. Now let's talk about Turkey, because Lammy citing them as a success story for customs union membership is genuinely bizarre. Turkey has a customs union with the EU, that's true, but is their economy a model of successful growth that Britain should be aspiring to emulate? Not exactly. Turkey has dealt with currency crises, massive inflation, political instability, and economic management that most Western economists would politely describe as unorthodox and less politely describe as what on earth are they doing? Turkey's inflation rate hit 85% in 2022. Their currency has collapsed multiple times. Their central bank policy has been subordinated to political interference in ways that make most economists weep. Yes, they have a customs union with the EU. No, their economic performance is not something Britain should be looking at and thinking, that's what we need. Using Turkey as your poster child for customs union benefits is like pointing to someone who crashed their car while wearing a seatbelt and arguing seatbelts cause accidents. The customs union isn't causing Turkey's economic issues, but it's certainly not preventing them either. But let's zoom out from the specific economic claims and look at the political implications here. David Lammy is the Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary. He's not just some backbench nobody, but the actual Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary, has gone rogue on Brexit, breaking manifesto pledges and making claims about economic damage that fall apart the moment you look at comparative growth data. It's political incompetence meets economic illiteracy, and honestly, it's quite the spectacle. It's political kite flying at its most transparent. Float the idea, see how people react, and if it goes badly, you can claim it was just one minister's personal view. If it goes well, the Prime Minister can embrace it later. The problem is that Labour specifically promised in their manifesto not to rejoin the single market or customs union. They knew this was a red line for many voters. They knew that fighting the last election on let's reverse Brexit would be electoral suicide, so they promised they wouldn't do it. And now, 6 months into government, they're already testing the waters on breaking that promise. It's the political equivalent of promising you've quit smoking and then being caught outside with a cigarette saying, I'm just holding it for a friend. The manifesto pledge issue is particularly significant because Labour has already broken or bent several manifesto commitments. They said they wouldn't raise taxes on working people and then hiked national insurance for employers, which obviously affects working people through lower wages and fewer jobs. They've canceled elections they knew were coming. They've made policy U-turns on multiple issues, and now they're floating the idea of reversing Brexit despite promising not to. At what point does a manifesto become completely meaningless? What's particularly frustrating about Lammy's intervention is that it's not based on honest engagement with the data. If he'd said, look, I think there are good political and strategic benefits to have closer ties with the EU, even if the economic data doesn't clearly support it, that would be one thing. You could have an honest debate about the non-economic benefits of EU integration. But instead, he made specific economic claims that are contradicted by basic GDP comparisons. He said Brexit badly damaged our economy when we've actually grown as faster than comparable EU economies. That's not a difference of opinion, that's just factually wrong. The broader pattern here is concerning. We've got a government that seems to make policy announcements based on political vibes rather than actual evidence. Lammy feels like Brexit was bad for the economy, so he says it was bad for the economy without apparently checking whether the data supports that feeling. It's governance by intuition rather than analysis, and it leads to embarrassing moments like an economist destroying your entire argument with one simple graph. What's the counterfactual here? How would Britain have performed if we'd voted to remain in 2016? Nobody knows for certain because we can't run the experiment twice. But the best approximation we have is comparing our growth to similar countries that stayed in the EU. And that comparison shows we've done fine. Not spectacularly, not terribly, just fine. About the same as France, better than Germany. That doesn't mean Brexit had no costs or that everything's been perfect. It means the apocalyptic predictions of economic collapse were wrong, and the claims of massive GDP damage don't hold up to scrutiny. There are legitimate debates to be had about Brexit's impact. Trade has shifted in some sectors, some regulations have changed, labor mobility has been affected. There are real differences between being in and out of the EU, and reasonable people can disagree.